Well, good afternoon to everyone, and welcome to Public Health's virtual education series, Wažookį, Family Conversations. I'm Renelle, public health nurse, joined by Jamie, community health representative supervisor, who will help moderate today's session. The goal of this series is to gather, learn, and share about Ho-Chunk culture, resources, services, and the connection to health. In public health, we focus on prevention, promotion, and protection of the health and well-being of our communities. Health and well-being are rooted in many aspects of our lives, from our physical body, our mental health, our spirit, the environment we live in, and much more. During these sessions, we will explore topics that can impact our health and well-being. Together, we will learn about tools and resources to improve our health and the health of our communities. Today, we're happy to have Alex Richeson, registered dietitian and nutritionist from Community Health, here to talk to us about simplifying home cooking. We're going to have about 45 minutes for Alex's presentation, followed by a Q&A. Please use the chat function to enter any comments or questions for our presenter. Jamie and I will monitor the chat throughout the presentation and read the questions for Alex at the end. You can also raise your hand and come off of mute during the Q&A to ask your questions out loud. Any questions that we don't have time for, we will forward to Alex and email the responses back to the group. This session is being recorded and will be posted on the Department of Health website and the Facebook page. Everyone, please welcome Alex.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining today. Got a 4-day weekend coming up, so I'm sure we're all excited for that. So today's topic that I chose to focus on is simplifying home cooking. I'm going to give a little disclaimer here, just right off the bat. What we're going to go through as we make our way through the slides I put together, it might seem like a lot, but what we're really going to focus on here is pretty much systematizing the way we go about our food prep and cooking in the kitchen, and putting a system together, can take a good amount of work at first, but it's like, getting a ball to the top of a hill and then pushing it over the edge, right? Once you get it to the top of the hill, you just let it roll down and it kind of does its own thing, right? So right off the bat as well, I want to go and ask everybody here what some of the biggest barriers are to cooking at home. So if you'd like to throw it in the chat, or if you'd like to unmute yourself and let me know what some of your biggest barriers are, I'd love to hear about them.
Time, sports, extracurricular activities, meetings.
Okay. So would you say like time?
Mm-hmm.
And Lena says the same thing, time, having sports and game nights.
Time is a big one. All right, yeah. So time might be one of the largest barriers. There's also a couple others which we'll go through in the presentation that I made for today. So why people choose convenience foods over home cooked foods? So the first one right at the top, we have, yes, those time constraints. And the data shows that as the number of employed adults in a household increases, so does the reliance on convenience foods. Some of the other reasons why people might choose convenience foods includes childcare, which you can, kind of bunch into time constraints as well, right? But the data shows that generally households with children tend to purchase more convenience foods. And there's a little asterisk here at the end, because the data also shows, and this might not be very intuitive, but as the number of children in a household goes up, the reliance on convenience foods actually goes down. There wasn't an explanation provided for why that is in the research that I looked at, but I'm assuming that it's because the more hands that you have in the house, the more that children can help with, activities that are going on in the kitchen. And the last barrier to home cooked foods is financial resources. So those who utilize SNAP benefits are less likely to buy convenience foods. So that's really awesome. Less likely than those who are eligible for SNAP but don't utilize it, if that makes sense. Some other data that I was able to find, general trends about cooking in the United States. About a third of Americans actually don't really know how to cook, and these are adults who don't know how to cook. And about, half say they aren't good at cooking. So it's like being invited to like a pickup basketball game. If you're not confident in your basketball skills, you're less likely to, engage in basketball at all, right? So so those are the barriers. And it's important to also think about, why it is important to cook at home as compared to going out to restaurants or maybe going to convenience centers and buying pre-prepped food there. The first one right at the top, we have, you can save money. There's plenty of data showing that convenience foods are, more expensive. They might be more accessible, but they're going to be more expensive in the long run because you're not only paying for, the packaging, the transportation of that food from one spot to another where you can buy it. You're also paying for the, like, if it's chopped vegetables, somebody's got to chop those vegetables up, right? So there's labor involved in that. So another reason to cook at home is the health benefits. So if we're making food at home, we can control what ingredients we're using. So if you have a family recipe that uses lard, you can just do a healthy swap and switch that to a more healthy fat, whether that's like olive oil or I would say that like a butter spread is probably a little bit better than lard, but you can do these healthy swaps with recipes and you can control, how much salt, how much sugar is going into the food you eat. And you can also control portion sizes. So I've gone out to restaurants where, they bring you a plate, a big, huge plate of food and you don't want to waste that food and you bought it, right? So you want to make sure that it's being eaten, right? So sometimes it can be hard to control those portion sizes when we go out to restaurants and eat out there. Another reason to cook at home, it's a family bonding experience. This is a time that parents and children can share with each other. And that kind of bleeds into the next reason to cook at home, which is, preserving generational knowledge. And what that means is, maybe, like I said before, you have a family recipe, or maybe you have recipe book with all family recipes from several generations. Like that passes down from, the older generation to us. And then let's say we have kids, we're going to pass that down to them. So we're going to preserve, the way that we've learned to cook, and also those family recipes. So what are we going to cover in this presentation? So if we have some expectations, like what are we going to get into here? For the most part, it's going to be, how to make what goes on in the kitchen easier. And I refer to it here as kitchen ergonomics, which just basically means exactly that, making the functions and operations in your kitchen a lot more easier, effective. So we're going to cover, what's in the kitchen, how to save money, how to save time, which is that big barrier that a lot of people face. And then we also are going to cover, how to get children on board. We're just going to dip our toes into that, though, with some simple approaches. So what's in the kitchen? So we want to make sure that our kitchen has the right tools And by tools, I mean, like cutting boards, knives, pots and pans, measuring utensils. Those are going to be our kitchen tools, we'll say. So let's just, imagine, a kitchen that has, tools everywhere on the countertops. You open the cabinets, there's, 10 sets of glass cups, and you open another one, there's like 10 sets of plates. There's lots of pots and pans and stuff. It's like, how many do you actually need? And that's one of the things that can actually make preparing food more difficult. So if we have too many tools in the kitchen, that just makes everything more complicated for us. And on the flip side, alternatively, if we don't have enough kitchen tools, that can really limit our ability to prepare food. Let's say that we have a lot of chopping to do for a recipe and we don't have a cutting board. Well, we're not going to be able to chop very much or very well, or maybe we don't have a set of kitchen knives. We're not going to be able to chop up the food that we need. So having the right tools is really important. We also want to make sure, and there's just like a little note down here at the bottom, we want to make sure that our kitchen is, free from clutter. I know it's really easy for any open space that you might have in your house to become a space for, car keys or documents, anything you can think of, but when it comes to the kitchen, the less clutter we have, we're able to keep it cleaner as well. Food safety is really important. And we can also use, those open spaces as food prep surfaces as well. So the next thing, what we want to have in our kitchen are our staple foods. So in this sense, we have like staple crops. You might have heard of that before: corn, rice, like grains. Like those are like staple crops. But when it comes to the kitchen, staple foods are, foods that you want to have in your kitchen, maybe your pantry at all times. And these are just basically the ingredients and whole foods that make up the majority of our diet. So having them stocked consistently makes it easier for us to have options for meals throughout the day, throughout the week, and so on. So let's go back into our headspace. Let's imagine, a kitchen where we have a recipe out in front of us and it calls for all these different ingredients, but if we don't have a well-stocked kitchen, we're going to be looking for the ingredients. Maybe we go to the pantry, we're looking for some type of spice. We don't have it, if it's salt or pepper. So if we're keeping our kitchen space consistently stocked, then when we need those ingredients, we can just go right over to where it's at and grab it. So that's pretty intuitive. So for our pantry, some of those staples we might want to have, like onions, potatoes, pasta. We got baking soda in here, flour, canned vegetables and fruits. For the fridge, when we think of fridge staples, that could be like milk, fresh fruits and vegetables, cheese, butter, condiments. And then for our freezer, this could look like, like frozen vegetables, frozen fruits, maybe bread, meats. So we have chicken and pork here. So that was pretty quick and simple, right? So we want to make sure we have just the right amount of kitchen tools, not too many, not too little. And we also want to make sure that we have a consistently stocked space, so pantry, fridge, and freezer. Next topic here, saving money. So this is a big one. So the key concepts here are, storing our food in a smart way, making sure that we're not wasting our food, because, about 40% of food that we purchase ends up going into the trash. Meal planning is another topic, and then we'll end on smart shopping before we move on to the next section here. So smart food storage, what could that look like? So a lot of people in the past, maybe even still nowadays, they like to leave their oranges, bananas, tomatoes, melons, stuff like that out on the countertop. Even bread, we'd like to leave that on the countertop. But they will actually last longer if we keep them in cold storage. So I pulled together like a little diagram chart here that shows, you know, conventionally, how long is it going to last on the countertop? So an example I have here is oranges. So we just leave that on the countertop. Maybe they'll last about a week. But if we throw those into the fridge, we could have oranges for up to a month. So for apples last a lot longer when you store them in the fridge as well. And I have bread on here too. So bread can last, and I'm sure it lasts probably longer than 4 days. I thought that was a little bit interesting there, but you can make it last, about 3 times longer keeping it in cold storage. And actually, if you keep your bread in the freezer, you can make it last up to about 3 months because not everybody is able to go through a loaf of bread within, 4 or 5 days, right? Or let's say that bread is on sale and you're going to get a deal by buying 3 loaves of bread. You could store the other 2 in the freezer and then pull them out once you've used up the other loaves, right? So we definitely want to make sure that we're saving food from the trash whenever possible. Foods that end up going into the landfill, they end up rotting, and when food rots, they create methane, which is about 28 times more potent than carbon dioxide when it comes to warming the earth. So that's a good reason right there to make sure that we're using up all the food that we have and not letting it go to waste. So one thing that we can do each week or maybe each day, it really depends upon what you want to do, but just having a check-in with your kitchen and looking at your perishable foods and seeing, whether they're still good or not, or maybe they're on the way out, right? So foods that are getting close to spoiling, for the most part, we can cut them up or maybe even par cook them and then freeze them to be used for later. So I have some examples here. So maybe the bananas and apples we left on the counter, they're starting to get a little bit soft, or the bananas are starting to turn brown, right? Well, we can cut up the apples, put them into a storage container, throw them in the freezer. They'll last, 3 to 6 months in the freezer. So you're extending that shelf life. With the bananas, pop them right out of the skins, throw them into a bag and throw them in the freezer. And these are foods that we can use in other ways too, like, making smoothies. I love to make breads, like banana bread. So you can use them in breads. You can also make compotes. And a compote is just like a fruit dish or a fruit topping. So you might put that into like a pie, or maybe you put it on top of ice cream. Usually, like compotes are used in dessert foods. For potatoes, zucchini, squash, carrots, like root vegetables like this, these can actually all be made into homemade fries. And when I was putting this presentation together, I saw like squash fries and turnip fries, and I had never seen these before, but I thought it was the coolest thing. So definitely, when they start going soft on you, you can just cut them up into like little fry shapes. And what I would recommend is par cooking. Or par baking or par boiling. Basically what that involves is where you, zucchini fries are amazing, Ronell says. I've never actually tried them, but that sounds really cool. Uh, so with like potatoes, if they're starting to go soft on you, cut them up into fry shapes, and then you boil them maybe about a minute or so, and then you want to cool them down real quick. That's what par cooking is, and then throw them into the freezer after that. That when you cook it partially, it's gonna extend that shelf life even further. Other root vegetables like onions, carrots, even, like celery, broccoli, cauliflower, these things can be put into soups. So we can freeze those after cutting them up into small pieces. So lots of different ways to use foods that we think are on the way out. Now into meal planning. So the way I like to go about meal planning might be a little bit different. Everybody's got their own go-to way to meal plan, but I go off the first in, first out concept here, which basically means, let's say that you're buying canned food, right? And each one of them has a date on it. So you want to make sure that the date that is closest is the one that's like in the front. It's the one that you're going to use first, right? You don't want to use the food that has the expiration date really far out and you have another one that's going to expire in 2 days, right? So using that, the food that's going to expire first, you're going to use that first, if that makes sense. So the way I like to go about meal planning, and again, everybody does this different, but I like to go with like a perishable vegetable approach where I'm going to choose like maybe 3 or 4 vegetables to eat throughout the week. Most Americans don't eat enough vegetables. So this is why I go about it this way. Because when we focus on the vegetables, then our foods, our meals are going to be centered on those vegetables. So the example I have here is, for this week, I'm choosing to eat leafy greens, broccoli, and Brussels sprouts. So now what I have to do is look at, Monday through Sunday, and then I'm going to plan which days to have those veggies on, and then decide which way that I'm going to eat it, right? So on Monday, there's going to be a salad. So what am I going to do with that salad? How am I going to prepare it? How am I going to eat it? This one says sunflower seeds, cheese, and dressing. So pretty simple. Tuesday, going to go with broccoli. So I'm going to grill it with olive oil, put some salt and pepper on it, done. Pretty simple. Wednesday, salad again, but I'm going to do it a little bit different to keep it, to have variety, keep things fresh. So for this salad on Wednesday, you're going to do olives, shredded carrot, feta, and dressing. Thursday, Brussels sprouts. So and as you can see the pattern here, I'm just choosing certain days to use certain vegetables on, and then deciding, which way I'm going to eat it. So each day is slightly different. And that, like I said, that keeps things fresh. It keeps your diet from getting boring. And then depending upon which, vegetable you're going with and what way you're going to cook it, then you can like pair it with a grain or with a meat. So like on Monday, if I'm having a salad with sunflower seeds, cheese, and dressing, well, I'd probably pair that with maybe some, maybe like a roll, a dinner roll, and some sort of meat, probably like 3 ounces of steak, because that's what I prefer. So this is one way you can go about meal planning. And, if we're in this frame of mind where it's like we want to save food from the trash, especially our fresh fruits and vegetables, if we focus on planning our meals around our perishable food items like vegetables, then we're making sure that we're using up our foods and they're not going into the waste bin. Shopping smart. So one of the best ways to shop smart, in my opinion, is to just, have a list of those kitchen staples, like all those foods I had talked about earlier, what's in your pantry, what's in your fridge, what's in your freezer, the things that you're going to make sure are stocked consistently in your kitchen. Just have a short list, or maybe you have a lot of food, so it might be a long list, but keep a list of all those foods and, go through that list each week and go through your fridge, your pantry, your freezer, check off the foods that, you are running out of. And what needs to be restocked. And, when you get to like 5 or 10 ingredients or foods that need to be restocked, that's when you're going to head off to the grocery store and You can make yourself a little list. These are the foods and ingredients that I need. And then when you go to the actual grocery store, try to stick with the list because it's really easy. Like what I tend to do whenever I go to Walmart, and I'm going to be very candid here. I have to go to the clearance section, you know, and that's where you can do impulse purchases, right? So try to stick to the areas of the store where you know the foods you need are at, because we can definitely get, you know, what is it, buyer's remorse or something like that later on when we make those impulse purchases and then we're looking at our bank account later and it's like, well, probably shouldn't have done that. So yeah, sticking with the list can help us save money. And now on to saving time, which is probably the biggest concern or element that most people have when it comes to cooking. So our key concepts here, using a reliable cookbook, prepping foods ahead, using some time savers, which it could be, you know, like kitchen tools or maybe cooking methods that are going to save us time. So let's start out with the reliable cookbook. So what does a reliable cookbook look like? I am always pushing this cookbook. This is the same one that I've used since I was in college, where I was learning how to cook. So this cookbook is just amazing. It has you know, nutrition facts for each recipe in it. It has serving sizes in it, and it gives you, you know, information about, you know, how long can you expect this to take, right? So the example here, it says, you know, the hands-on time is 10 minutes. It's going to take an hour to chill and 13 minutes to cook and stuff. So it's nice to have all this information at your disposal here. So one, you know exactly what you're eating, because that way you can control, you know, how much salt is going in your food or how much fat is going in your food. The serving sizes is great because, you know, a lot of recipes they'll say, well, it makes this much, and it's like, okay, well, it makes this much, but what exactly is the serving size, you know, of this stuff? So just going back to these points I have over here. So a good cookbook is also, it's going to have, you know, a variety of recipes, breakfast, lunch, dinner. Maybe if you're vegetarian or vegan, it'll have like meatless recipes. It'll have, you know, sides and desserts. We went through, you know, it's a good recipe book's going to have, you know, serving sizes, nutrition facts, etc. And then a good cookbook like this one here, and this is why I really recommend this cookbook, is that it actually has, you know, like cooking basics and charts and knife techniques and calculations, you know, kitchen math. And so this can be so helpful when guiding us throughout the week or throughout the day, in, you know, one, figuring out what we want to eat, and two, you know, figuring out, you know, is it feasible to make this type of meal? Do I have enough time? Well, this is your tool for success here. Like, this is one of the most important things to do. Use a reliable cookbook. Prepping ahead. So I had talked about, you know, making your meal plan for the week, basing that meal plan off of your perishable food items, your vegetables. But once you do that, you know, like you say to yourself, I'm going to have broccoli on this day, that day, that day. Now we got to, you know, make that easier for us come the day of. So once you make a food plan or a meal plan, you know, just take a look at your schedule for the week. Sundays are typically a good day. People usually like to relax on Sundays, but you can also take advantage of that free time. You know, if it's 1 or 2 hours, and just, you know, prep some food in advance. And it could be really simple, and it could be as simple as, you know, just chopping up fruits and vegetables and putting them into food storage containers. And then you just throw those food storage containers into the fridge. So let's say come Tuesday, you know, you want to have your Brussels sprouts. You don't want to have to chop them up all on Tuesday, right? And so on Sunday, you had chopped them all up. Tuesday comes around, you're just pulling that right out of the fridge and you're going to slap it on the grill or put it in the oven, whatever you're going to do. But you've removed a whole component of that food prep process, right? So you're saving time that way. You could bake or roast meats ahead of time, bag them up, refrigerate them, or freeze them. Um, a lot of people don't really like to do this because once you cook meat and then freeze it again, it can make the meat a little bit dry, but there are some cooking methods that you can use to make sure your meats like pork or chicken or whatever stay nice and moist and appetizing. Same goes with cooking rice and other grains. You can fully cook them ahead of time and then freeze them. It might change the texture a little bit, but you know, when you do this on say a Sunday for 1 or 2 hours, you're saving yourself time every single day. You know, you're cutting out a whole step in your food prep. All right, and our time savers. So these are some of the tools that, you know, over the years I've gotten to work with and have come to really love because, you know, they're versatile. You can use them for lots of different things. Like an apple corer is really useful for, of course, apples. You can also use them to make wedges with potatoes. There's other uses for them. A blender, you know, you can use them to make smoothies, but also to make soups. You can shred meats that way. And, and I'll be candid, once again, I like to throw some mayonnaise and some chicken into the blender and just blend it up and put that on sandwiches. And my mom thinks it's disgusting, but hey, it works for me. I think it's delicious. So you can shred meats this way if you choose to. Um, and then we have like a fry cutter, this little thing that kind of looks like an apple corer. This thing is fantastic. I bought one of these within the last year and I've just been making all sorts of fries, except zucchini fries. I haven't done that yet. But that's, you know, just imagine it. For each potato, you know, you're making 10 or 8 vertical cuts, and then you're trying to do horizontal cuts and stuff. And with this thing, you put the potato down, you slice it once, and you have your fries, right? So that makes it so much more simple. We have some mincers. Oh yeah, Giovanna says like a Instapot. So we have the mincer. We also have this shredder here, or this grater. I like to use this for all sorts of vegetables, you know, carrots, root vegetables, cheese as well. Joanne says air fryer as well. And then we have this doohickey here. I think it's just called an onion cutter, but I've used it for all sorts of vegetables. So you might have to do a couple cuts. You see the onion in there. You might cut the onion in half and then slice it in half again. But for the most part, after that, you just put it in this little machine here and you just push it down and it chops it all up into little pieces. It makes it really quick and easy. So definitely invest in those tools if you want to save time. And Giovanna, here we go. Here's our slow cooker, Instapot. Our baking and roasting is all on here too. So what's really cool about these, well, we have a technique and then we have some kitchen tools here, our slow cooker and Instapot. But, you know, we put all our ingredients right into it. We set the time on it, maybe the heat, and then we just let it sit, right? With the slow cooker, maybe for 8 hours or so. With the Instapot, it's a little bit faster than that. And then with baking and roasting, you know, we're like the potatoes here, potato wedges, you put them on the tray, you stick them in the oven, you set the time, the temperature, and you're just gonna let it sit. And let's see, what am I gonna do while I'm waiting for the food to cook? Well, I could do anything, right? So let's say, you know, your children need you to help them with something. Well, that's good because the slow cooker's going. I got 2 hours, you know, let's help the kids with their homework. Maybe you have some like finances or other paperwork you got to do. Or let's say you like to record music like I do or play bass or something. Hey, while your food's cooking, go for it. Um, so as compared to cooking things right on the stove top, let's say you have a range, you want to pan fry stuff or saute stuff. Well, we're sitting there looking at our pan, you know, going like this and moving things around, mixing it up and stuff. It's like that is what you're doing for the next 10, 15 minutes, right? You're watching that pan and you can't do anything else, so that's not a time saver. But these methods of cooking definitely are. All right, and getting children on board. So this, just like saving time, getting the children on board, huge barrier to cooking at home because, nowadays we have access to all of these delicious foods, that have just the right mix of salt, sugar, and fat, like they're just hyper palatable, super delicious. So, the kids nowadays, it's hard to get them into home cooked food. So it's best to start young, as young as you can. And so when I was looking into this topic, I found an article from a pediatric dietitian. Her name is Edwina. I couldn't find the last name, but I thought what she said was pretty cool. So what she had to say was, when we give in and offer an alternative meal out of fear that they being the kids won't eat, or because they threw enough of a fit, there's a few things that we're doing here. So we're giving up control around our role in feeding our children, which can cause, mealtime battles. And we could be potentially increasing or making worse, picky eating habits that our kids might have. Because, if we're letting our kids choose what foods they want to eat, they're going to get stuck eating those same foods. And they're not going to be adventurous. They're not going to try new foods. And that can follow us throughout our whole life, right? Picky eating habits can follow us throughout our whole life and increase the risk of, chronic diseases like diabetes and heart disease. And then the last point she had here was just what I said here, we're risking poor nutrition, which can increase that risk of chronic disease. So what are we going to do to get the kids on board? So some key concepts here: get them involved, and I'll get more into that. We want to reduce the anxiety around meal times. And a lot of people, whether they're adults or kids, don't really like leftovers. So we want to reframe leftovers or think about leftovers differently in a more appealing way. And then we also want to make sure that our kids are, active. We want to reduce grazing so that come dinner time, kids are actually hungry. So diving in, what does getting them involved look like? So we had talked about, or I had talked about, meal planning, right? So we can actually ask the kids, well, what do you want to have for dinner on Wednesday or Thursday of this week? Is there, anything on your mind that you want this week? So you can look at recipes together, ask for their input on meals for the week, try new and different things. And that could look like, preparing a new food together or picking a new food together. Maybe you're going to try a new cooking technique, which is the third point here. So show them, cooking and food preparation methods. I have a take them shopping with you, and I do get a lot of people telling me, yeah, well, my kids aren't going to behave in the grocery store, and so I don't take them with me. Yes, I understand that can be very difficult. The reason why I at least, suggest this to parents is because, kids can take ownership of, what they're eating. And so when, they get to choose what they're going to eat, they're going to be more likely to eat it. And then the last point I have here, if possible, introduce the kids to, um, gardening and get them involved in gardening. Because the more we know about our food, the less fear and anxiety we're going to have around it. All right, so that mealtime anxiety. So getting children involved gives them ownership, like I said, so they're going to be more likely to accept the food that's offered to them. So we can also provide our kids with some idea of what to expect for our meals ahead of time. So, because if, our children are like, oh, what's for dinner? I don't, what is mom and dad making? Am I going to like it? Am I not? They can go into the mealtime with some sort of expectation that's going to lower those anxiety levels. And maybe what you could do is just implement a little, a chalkboard or maybe a whiteboard that you keep in your kitchen that just has something just like this. So the dinner menu, chicken, squash, mixed berries. The kids are going to see that. They're going to be like, oh, okay, so that's what mom and dad plan on making, or mom or dad. And we want to try as much as possible to stay away from, like the complex names like, chicken carbonara or fettuccine alfredo, because, young children aren't going to really know what that is. And that can also cause some anxiety or be scary for them. So, if we're having chicken carbonara, we could just, put chicken. And I can't come up with any other names of complex dishes, but I think you get the idea. And then, just take note of what dishes the kiddos really enjoy. Maybe take note of what you also enjoy, because if you have like a list of all your favorite dishes, well, planning meals for, say, a week gets a lot easier. Instead of trying to come up with ideas off the top of your head, use your favorite foods list or your favorite dishes list, and then just kind of arrange them on your meal plan for the week. Sorry about that. All right, the fun part, reframing leftovers. So I'm not a kid anymore, so it's hard for me to think in that way. Uh, but I just know that, a lot of kids, even adults, don't really like the idea of leftovers. Maybe it's because it's not as fresh. Maybe there's something having to do with it being like, like a waste type of issue. It's like, oh, well, that was supposed to be thrown in the trash, right? Because that's what we didn't finish, so I don't want to eat that. But so one thing we could do, communicate with our children. So let them know that, especially if you're meal planning with them, they're going to know what's for dinner, throughout the week, right? So, let them know, hey, Sunday, I'm preparing rice or whatever to be used on, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday this week. So when those days come along and they're, they've looked in the fridge, they see the whole container full of rice, right? That's not technically like leftovers. That's, planned overs, as we like to say. Um, so does that seem to make sense? Okay. And then, so we also want to make sure we're getting our children active or keeping them active. We want to reduce grazing. So when our children are physically active, they're going to burn off the extra energy. They're going to improve how strong their bones and muscles are growing, and activity can, promote hunger throughout the day as well. We want to get into a routine with meals and snacks, because constant grazing can lead to children not being hungry come mealtime. So, a lot of the time the kids might be like hey, I want a snack. It's 2 o'clock and dinner's at, 4:30. If you let them snack from, 2 o'clock to 3:30, they might not be hungry for dinner. So just getting them into a routine with meals and snacks can promote, um, good mealtime relations and reduce those mealtime battles, you could say. So I'm at the end of my presentation. We're right at 1:46. So we're gonna field questions and maybe there was something that I didn't touch on, or maybe there's some stuff in the chat we could talk about.
So Jamie put a good question in the chat. She asks, how long do cooked meats last in the fridge? Could I possibly cook in bulk 4 pounds of hamburger, use 2 pounds on Tuesday, and then the rest on Thursday or Friday?
I would say yes. I would definitely cook them as the patty, which I'm sure you were getting at doing. I mean, it could last as long as 6 months in the freezer, just like raw meat. So that's totally good. Yeah. How long will it last in the fridge? So, okay, with the freezer, up to 6 months. In the fridge, that's a different story. So, um, typically meats can last, I believe, 3 to 4 days before you want to either put them in the freezer or make sure that they're eaten up.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
Is rice good as, like how you had on there, you could cook rice in bulk and then have it sitting in your fridge from like Monday to Friday? I heard, I don't know, how sometimes it's information, but there's carcinogen in rice that if you eat leftover or something, it's not really healthy.
I would have to look into that. I don't want to say for sure that I've heard this, but maybe it's arsenic or something. I can't remember exactly.
Maybe that's what it is. I don't know. I have no idea.
Yeah.
I mean, I've
I-
never heard of it.
Where it could
I would
cause-
really have to look into it to give you a better answer to that.
Do you wash your rice or not? I'm kidding. I wash mine too.
Do you have any recommendations to make an adult not a picky eater?
Oh my gosh.
Ooh.
I have a husband and he's a picky eater.
Deal breaker. No, just
Well.
kidding.
That's hilarious.
Yeah. Oh.
Does it seem to be like a textural issue or like because some people can get overwhelmed by certain sensations like textures and smells. Does it have to do with that, or is it like more like fear or anxiety based? Like, I'm not familiar with that food, so keep it away from me.
I'm not sure. He's definitely a meat and potatoes guy.
Okay. So, and our eating habits do kind of follow us throughout our life. So if that is, his safe place, his comfort place, that's what he grew up on, maybe that's what he'll always go back to. So, I guess the only input I could give in this context, if it is, that's his safe place, is um, introducing other foods in a way that is also safe and comfortable for him, that it's something that he can rely on to give him a certain feeling.
Okay, so we were just Googling the whole rice thing.
Oh yeah.
And it says, while rice consumption is generally considered safe, some studies suggest a potential link between rice and an increased risk of certain cancers, particularly due to arsenic contamination.
Hey, interesting.
Amy brought that to my attention.
Well, my girls, one's gonna be a pharmacist, and one's a nurse. So, yeah, they always tell me, no, mom, you can't do that. But like, I mean, I've ate rice all my life. You know what I mean? Like second day or whatever. But they said you shouldn't eat it if it's older than 24 hours. Throw it away. Okay. But then I read somewhere you can store it a certain way. I don't know if you have to store it when it's hot right away, put it in the fridge, or it was something like that. Because they got me curious, so I started looking it up, you know. But, yeah.
If I was gonna use it throughout the week and I had, kind of batch cooked it, I would definitely freeze it.
Okay,
That's
that
the
would
way
be
I
good.
would do it. Because I would definitely say, if the rice is in the fridge for 24 hours, it is probably a good idea to toss it. So I would probably freeze it.
Does anyone else have any questions for Alex?
Can you give us a couple of food ideas, suggestions? Maybe something new, I don't know, maybe.
Like
That's
recipes?
Yeah, that's like the toughest question, like what's for dinner? What do you guys want? It's like constantly, it's
The
like,
same
it's an
thing.
adult
Yeah.
every day, like, what are we? Yeah.
I guess the input I could offer here is, it's like that favorite foods list, like just writing down, what is your partner's favorite meals or dishes or foods, and or same with your children if you have them, because then that's gonna be your go-to for like throwing ideas out there, um, and having that like a cookbook too, a good reliable cookbook that you can go through, that's a good place to source ideas from as well.
Mhm.
I have a huge list on my phone I can send you.
Oh, yeah, sure.
And
shoot
you
it
have
my
to send
way.
me some back.
Okay,
Share.
Hey, that's an idea.
yeah. Yeah, yesterday, my son, he was like, chicken noodle soup. And I was like, okay, so when I picked him up from his school sport, did you get the ingredients for chicken noodle soup? And I'm like, yes. So he's my little like food. What are we having? He tells me, well, how about this today? Okay.
That's awesome.
Yeah. No.
Jamie asks in the chat, how do you make the transition easier from cooking for a large family to a smaller one? As her kids leave the nest, how does she adjust?
Um, my the way I guess I would go about it, going back to the cookbooks, is maybe I know there is a meals for two cookbook you can rely on, um, or taking your favorite recipes from another cookbook and trying the best you can to um, convert those into smaller servings. Okay. Yeah. So if you choose to, not go by cookbooks or measure ingredients, you could still go with a batch cooking method or still prepare the same amount of food that you are preparing with the kids being at home. But then, plan out which days of the week you're going to have servings of those dishes. Um, and freezing them and then bringing them out and thawing them a day early. So I'll ask a question to everybody who is here. What was the most useful piece of information that was in the slides today?
Sorry. I would say mine would have to be like a cold storage, storing like food that we normally would leave sitting out in like a counter or on the table.
Yeah, I was like in the, prep for the week, like one time I, froze, fresh fruit. I think it was carrots, but you know what? They turned, rubbery, freezer burn. I don't know, because it was just like overnight I kept them in, and then I used it the next day. But they lost their, freshness, I guess. I don't know. I don't know why they turned out like that. But yeah, I'm trying to eat different too because me and my brother are both borderline diabetics. We live together, so I'm trying to learn how to cook different for us, But he's kind of picky, and I notice he doesn't really eat leftovers that much. I like leftovers, but when it comes to him, he'll say, "Nah, what else is there?" I'm just like,
Nah, what else are you gonna cook?
yeah, so I don't know. Still trying to figure it out.
There you go. There's a diabetic cookbook.
Yeah,
Yeah. Or the nutritionist.
tribal.
Yeah. Can't be right,
Right.
right in, and then. Other just that.
Yeah. But I like the one too where it's getting the kids more involved. Like my grandkids, some of them are more meat eaters and some are pasta eaters. They don't like it all. You know what I mean? But I notice my daughter, she does that. She'll say, "Well, come help me make this," or you know what I mean. I mean, I don't know that it gets them to eat it, but yeah.
I did prepare like a list of different activities that kiddos can do in the kitchen to help with meal prep and everything. So um, if if desired, if you want me to send out the slides for the presentation, I can also send along some other resources like what the kids can help with in the kitchen or help with for food prep.
Yeah. You know what we could really help with is eating this.
Yeah.
And then Melissa put into the chat, so planning out when you're gonna incorporate a vegetable in the week, the salads, broccoli planning sheet. Thanks, Melissa. And Lena, with my older kids, I made them cook one night a week, picking out the ingredients and then helping them when they got to middle school age. My little girls are now at the age now to start. I love that.
Yeah, it's a nice when I have an older daughter who's a chef. And my son, his new thing is like jambalaya. So when he cooks, it's usually jambalaya, but it's good, yeah. Yeah, so he's incorporating like new cooking, like one time he tried to make Spanish rice and that was he's learning.
I tried to make that too, and it didn't turn out exactly the way I thought it would. I don't think I washed the rice. That might have been the problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, his rice is still hard, so.
Oh, okay.
But his jambalaya is great. So, yeah.
Well, we're right at 2 o'clock. If nobody else has any burning questions. Well, Pinagigi, Alex, thank you for such a wonderful presentation. We're all probably a little bit hungry now, even though we just had lunch. Thank you everyone for joining us today. As a reminder, this session is recorded and will be available on the Department of Health website and the Facebook page. We look forward to seeing you at our next session, which will be in 2 weeks on Wednesday, May 7th from 1 to 2 p.m. We'll be joined by Ho-Chunk Nation Labor Department. You can use the same link as today to join all future sessions, or to add the recurring WebEx link to your calendar. You can reach out to Jamie and I, and we will forward you the invite. We welcome all feedback related to this series. If you have a topic that you would like to learn more about, or if you would like to present on a topic, please reach out to Jamie and I, and Jamie has put our contact information in the chat. So have a great rest of your day, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you very much.